All right, when we talk about decentralization, when we talk about Congress, one of the things that I think Congress is maybe challenging to students is because there's just so many parts. You know, when you think about it, in terms of the executive branch, I mean, you guys have known about the president since kindergarten, probably since before kindergarten. But in terms of Congress, a lot of people just, it's difficult to identify because you can't look anywhere and go, wow, somebody's in charge of the executive or of the legislative branch. You know, you can look at the executive branch, and some of you might know that there's a Department of State and Health and Human Services and the FBI, and you know all these executive branch agencies, but again, those are in the movies, you know, or, you know, we've kind of got this, like, general understanding. But Congress, everything works to kind of pull the power out of Congress. But that was the key, and that was the point, because they didn't want anybody to be in charge of our most important branch and our most powerful branch. So we refer to it as a very decentralized body. You can refer to it as a very status quo body. David Fallgotter, what's status quo mean? Do you remember High School Musical? Everybody knows status quo because of High School Musical. Okay, you don't know High School Musical. Come on, Olivia, what is it?
It's like what normally goes on.
What normally goes on, right. So we're going to sing the song later. But
Yeah.
So status quo, it's hard for Congress to change. But remember, that's what our framers wanted, because they didn't want a singular person to be able to come in and change everything. So we're going to kind of work through then and understand, like, what are all these things that work to pull the power out of Congress and make it very difficult then for Congress to move at a quick, efficient pace. So if we start with the Constitution, right? First of all, it divided Congress in half. It made it two parts. What's the word for that? Bicameral. It is a bicameral body. We weren't the first legislature in the world to do that. The British system is like that. And if you guys remember from world history, you may have learned about how in the British system, they were also like, they kind of answered to different groups. You had a House of Commons, and then you had a House of Lords. And they had like different kind of constituencies that they answered to. They actually have different powers. So ours was modeled the same way, that we have a Senate and we have a House of Representatives. So not only are the parts different, like, or is it split up, but they actually have different powers, different qualifications. They answer to different groups. It is very difficult for us to pass laws simply because of the chambers, even if they're the same party, because they have like a different objective and a different mentality. And so one of the things we'll explore today is how do all of those differences affect us making policy. Okay? Individual congressmen, they're elected as individuals. And what you're going to notice in your lifetime is members of Congress will tell you how they're different than Congress. They're going to tell you how they're a Washington outsider. They often will, if you pay attention to campaign speeches, they actually like run against the body. They'll tell you like how they're going to go in and they're going to change things and they're going to make it different. The best description I've ever heard of Congress is 535 individual entrepreneurs. Because they are there trying to make a name for themselves, to represent their constituencies, and if you're in the House of Representatives, you have to reapply for your job every 2 years. And just think about that. Think about the adults in your life who are not good at their jobs if they had to reapply for their jobs every 2 years. Are you thinking of some people right now? Right? You know, some of you might even be going, ooh, if I had to reapply for my job, there's no way they would hire me, right? So they have to do that based on popularity. So they're always looking for ways to distinguish themselves and make themselves different so that we will continue to reelect them. All right, our party system plays a huge role in decentralizing power. Everything in Congress is run based on party. Say that with me, please. Everything in Congress is run based on party, okay? Remember that we said that that's one of the functions of our political party system is to govern and to organize policymaking. So as a result, they pull stuff like out and away. The committee system. Congress is organized into committees and subcommittees, and the purpose of those committees is to legislate about particular topics. So you have an agriculture committee, a ways and means committee, a rules committee, foreign affairs. There's like all these different topics. And generally speaking, what happens is a member of Congress gets on a committee and then they stay on a committee. And they try to get on a committee where they can do something in particular for their congressmen or for their constituents. So like your Congressman Sam Johnson, he is on the House Ways and Means Committee. They write the tax code. Why would he, representing District 3 in Texas, want to help write the tax code?
Is it because we're Republican state?
We are super, and specifically we're a very Republican area, but even more importantly, we are a tax-averse state. Like people like Texas and low taxes, those things tend to go together. And so when he gets on that committee, then he can work to try to make sure that he's doing things where he is serving his constituents. And then he can come back home and claim, look, here's all the things I did to keep your taxes low. Tanner, sorry.
What do you call it, like, what is, when it's like the agricultural groups or the tax groups, like, what is the name for that? Like,
Just a committee. I'm not sure what you...
You remember on the Iron Triangles how, like...
Oh, well, it was committees and then subcommittees. So all of those committees have a subcommittee below them that handles even a more specific area of policy. So like the House Appropriations Committee writes the budget, but they have like 13, I think, committees below it. And they handle just a smaller portion.
So is it kind of like parties and they're like interest groups, like committees, subcommittees?
Yeah, and kind of in a way, yeah, because they become just even more specialized. Members serve on multiple committees, but if nothing is important in Congress, the thing that is most important is the committee system. That is where the work actually happens. That's where like you actually accomplish something. If you go home and you flip on C-SPAN tonight, like you're not going to see a ton of people standing on the floor in the House and the Senate like you do in the movies, unless it's a special vote. Committees is where everything's really, like the work is taking place. Constituents and interest groups also work really hard to kind of pull the power out of Congress because we approach members of Congress individually. We, we view that person represents us. And so when I think about Congress, like if I was going to reach out and contact Congress for anything, I don't email 535 people. I email John Cornyn, or I email Ted Cruz, or Sam Johnson, because those are the people that represent me. And we tend to think about them in relationship to that, like what do they do for us individually? And interest groups are the same. You know, they're going to sit down and lobby, they're going to sit down and educate or inform specific members of Congress, because it's all about like making deals with each individual member. All members of Congress have a staff, you know, a handful of people. Staffers are usually people kind of fresh out of college. Even like sometimes in college you can do internships. It's a huge stepping stone into, you know, working in DC and working as a lobbyist or working with interest groups, or even being a congressman yourself. And they actually do a lot of the work. They write bills. They go to meetings. The one time that I had the opportunity to take students to DC, it was a staffer that arranged everything for us. Yes, I got to take my kids and they got to meet Sam Johnson and he shook their hand, but she told us, okay, be in this hall at such and such time because he'll be going from one meeting to another. We'll stop, you can meet him, you can ask a couple pictures, and then you'll have to go on. So they really, like if you think about this school, like as the staff, we always joke that the most important person in the school is Ms. Costello, Mr. Spain's secretary, because she knows everything that's going on. So it's going to be the same way for a staffer. The committees themselves also have staff. So there are people whose job, they're unelected, and their whole job is to run the infrastructure of that committee. So if I as a member or constituent want to know what's going on in a committee and I call up, I'm probably not going to talk to a member of Congress. I'm going to talk to a staffer on that committee or a staffer in that agency. And they have staff at home and staff in DC. So they have offices in multiple places. The executive branch. The president will work to form relationships with members of Congress. You all know that the president doesn't make law. And yet presidential candidates right now are campaigning telling you all the things that they're going to do. So if they want a law to be passed, if they want a policy to be changed, they have to figure out a way to get Congress to do that. So really successful presidents work to formulate relationships with members of Congress, you know, and they'll foster those relationships. My favorite is when I think about LBJ and everything he did to get the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. You guys, he would have like individual meetings with individual members of Congress, Republican or Democrat, and they would sit them down, he would call them, he'd say, what am I going to do to get you to vote for this bill? And then he would meet with another one, and another one, and another one. And he had to approach it that way. You know, all presidents have like weekly meetings where they'll meet with the speaker and the majority leader from both chambers, sometimes the minority leader. They're like in constant communication because while those people aren't in charge, they're the highest ranking, and at least they can kind of help to set the tone for what's going on.
Is it kind of like if they vote, then it's going to trickle down?
They control kind of the flow of legislation. They can definitely stop something from happening. Okay? And then when we talk about support agencies, because Congress does a lot of jobs, there's also, like outside of elected people, besides staffers, there's people that help to run those agencies. For example, there's something called the Congressional Budget Office. Those are economists that work for Congress that help them to formulate the budget. They are not elected. They are not accountable to the voters in any way, but they are the people that help Congress to write their budget. So they're policy specialists. And the president has his equivalent as well. And so there's all of these unelected people who are actually affecting the legislature and, again, serve to pull the power out. Okay? There's one more that I want you to write on here that's missing. I always forget to add it. It's called a caucus. And it's spelled the same way as the caucus we talked about with elections, but it's not the same thing. All right, caucuses are made up of members of Congress who have something in common, and it causes them to kind of bind together. So, for example, there is currently right now a caucus called the Freedom Caucus, and it is made up of people who are very kind of across chambers, who are very Tea Party oriented, and there's about 60 of them. And that's one of the reasons that John Boehner's having such a hard time leaving the House of Representatives. They're having a hard time finding somebody to fill his place because no kind of moderate Republican says that they can work with the Freedom Caucus because they don't know how, because they can't meet the demands of what that group wants. There's a Sunbelt Caucus, there's a Women's Caucus, there's a Latino Caucus. There are seriously tons. There's one, I looked up one, there's for members of Congress who are Islamic. There are, it's like everything. And so it's just that, I guess it's another way of grouping or associating, or it's another kind of faction, right? Because fundamentally that's what it is. It's people that have something in common, and they don't have everything in common, but they can use that power to increase their voice. Okay? All right, so here is what you guys are going to do today. All right, if you look on, hold on, let me stop this.